taking a year's leave of absence to work on my book. And also, Sarah, we need distance. We need space because...
But okay, I'm not even going to be in any of your classes. I checked my schedule and everything's fine. I'm not even one of your classes. I'm on the other side of campus.
The thing is,
The scene between Professor Dana and her former student Sara unfolds with an almost unbearable tenderness, weighted by restraint, regret, and the ache of unspoken truth. A moment that, while intimate, resonates profoundly with many queer and women viewers, because it is not about seduction, but about the difficulty of honesty in a world that still punishes women for wanting to live fully and love freely. The dialogue, sparse yet loaded with subtext, captures two women standing at opposite edges of desire and consequence. Dana, the older woman, burdened by career, marriage, and the social structures that define respectability, and Sara, the younger, freer, and yet more vulnerable one, who has experienced love that refuses to be quietly erased. For queer women, this moment is instantly recognizable. The coded language of care, the fear of visibility, the way affection must be negotiated around shame and responsibility rather than celebrated. Dana's attempts to do the right thing by invoking her authority and guilt reflect the heavy moral calculus many women in same-sex relationships, especially those marked by power imbalances or secrecy, are forced to perform, to measure love not by how it feels, but by how dangerous it might be. When Dana insists, "I took advantage of you," we hear both a confession and a retreat, not only from Sara, but from herself. From the part of her that briefly glimpsed liberation and can no longer admit it aloud. Her language becomes the language of patriarchy disguised as protection, a pattern many queer women recognize when older generations of women have internalized systems of shame so deeply that self-denial becomes a form of survival. Sara, meanwhile, embodies the raw vulnerability of first love, the kind that feels like awakening, defying boundaries because it doesn't yet understand why it must exist within them. When she says, "You told me that you love me," it isn't manipulation, it's the desperate cry of someone whose emotional reality is being rewritten in front of her, told that what she lived, what she felt, was wrong, or at least less real than the structures designed to contain it. This moment encapsulates how society continues to devalue women's emotions, especially when those emotions are directed toward one another. Dana's voice trembles with the weight of apology, but her apology is not for love itself. It is for its consequences, for daring to happen in a world where female desire between women is still treated as a moral failure rather than an authentic human experience. Her repeated "I'm sorry" functions almost like an erasure ritual, a way to cleanse herself in the eyes of an invisible moral authority, yet every word betrays how deeply she feels for Sara. It is this tension, the simultaneous confession and denial, that gives the scene its queer poignancy. To many lesbian and bisexual viewers, Dana's rationalizations echo the lifelong negotiations queer people make with institutions that demand we compartmentalize our hearts. Her insistence that she must work through her marital and professional issues before addressing what happened reveals how women are conditioned to prioritize order, duty, and others' comfort over their own authenticity. Meanwhile, Sara's emotional directness, her refusal to let love be minimized or redefined into guilt, represents the radical honesty queer love demands. She does not accept invisibility. She names love as love, even when it's dismissed as a mistake. This insistence is both heartbreaking and empowering, for it exposes how patriarchy fears women's emotional clarity. The mere act of a woman saying, "You love me," to another woman, without irony, without metaphor, still carries revolutionary power, precisely because society continues to view such declarations as deviations rather than possibilities. The film refuses to treat their relationship as scandalous or salacious. Instead, it positions it as emotionally real, grounded in care, mutual respect, and a longing for recognition. Dana's guilt and Sara's pain mirror the intergenerational divide within queer identity, those who grew up believing they had to hide versus those who demand to be seen. Yet both women are trapped by the same societal discomfort, the enduring fear of women's intimacy, the anxiety that female connection outside of men's framing might disrupt the entire hierarchy of who gets to define love. Dana's attempt to intellectualize their relationship, to turn it into a moral problem, reflects how institutions discipline women's emotions, especially when those emotions threaten heteronormative narratives. But beneath her careful words lies a truth she cannot suppress. When she says, "It did mean something," the audience feels the entire history of silenced queer women echoing through her, from teachers who hid their rings to lovers who were forced to call each other friends. Sara's plea for one more time is not about physical intimacy. It's about closure, about reclaiming her own story before it is rewritten as an error in someone else's career. Her persistence reminds us that queer longing is not only about wanting, it's about wanting to be remembered, to have one's love acknowledged as real. In this sense, the scene transcends its literal context to become a meditation on how women navigate power, desire, and the fragile hope of emotional safety. The conversation unfolds like a confession interrupted, Dana trying to absolve herself while Sara begs her not to rewrite love as wrongdoing. It's the clash between two forms of courage, Dana's, to survive within the world as it is, and Sara's, to name the truth even when it cannot survive that world. For queer women, this dichotomy feels painfully familiar, especially for those who have loved in secret, those whose relationships were framed as mistakes, and those who have had to choose between being honest and being safe. The quiet intimacy of their exchange, the pauses, the almost whispered "I love you, sis," carries the weight of centuries of repression. It reminds us that even now, depictions of women's love often come wrapped in moral discourse, forcing audiences to view emotional honesty through the lens of transgression. The discomfort that this scene might evoke for some viewers is precisely why it matters. It holds a mirror to our collective unease with women who claim agency over their feelings. The film refuses to let either woman become a stereotype. Dana is not a villain, Sara is not naive, and in doing so, it reclaims queer storytelling from sensationalism, grounding it instead in emotional truth. What we witness is the anatomy of repression, how two women love each other and then must dismantle that love to survive the aftermath. For LGBTQ+ viewers, it resonates as both a wound and a warning. That even when we think we have progressed, the expectation to apologize for our feelings persists. Yet, there is beauty in this pain because beneath the sorrow lies an act of resistance. The fact that they dared to love at all, that they spoke their hearts even within the confines of fear. For women watching, queer or not, this moment captures the universal struggle of choosing between authenticity and acceptance, between what the world expects and what the heart knows. Dana's self-censorship, her careful containment of emotion, mirrors the way so many women are trained to downplay desire, to intellectualize feeling rather than inhabit it. Sara's refusal to accept that narrative is the counterpoint, the voice of a generation less willing to apologize for their hearts. Together, they embody a cycle that continues to haunt women, to love, to hide, to explain, to grieve. The emotional truth of this scene is not in its forbiddenness, but in its fragility, the courage it takes for women to say, "This matters." In the end, their conversation becomes less about the specifics of professor and student, and more about the timeless tension between repression and self-recognition. Dana's final words, heavy with sorrow, and Sara's quiet persistence form a dialogue between past and future, between caution and hope. For queer audiences, it is a mirror, not of scandal, but of survival. The scene, stripped of sensationalism, becomes a testament to how love between women endures in the spaces where it's least allowed to exist, and how every apology for that love carries both the pain of loss and the quiet promise of visibility.